you.
Yeah. Okay.
That voice.
Yeah. So what I want to do in this short talk is to pick up some ideas and themes from my recent book on called Toy Theory that explores the differences and continuities between toys and games. So see how maybe my argument would be that paying attention to toys as a distinct kind of cultural object can tell us a lot about games and play more generally, as well as the argument I make throughout the book, can tell us a lot about technology in the broadest sense. So a kind of underlying thought experiment of the book is that we think of technology as arising from responses to humans' environmental needs, for clothing, for shelter, for food, to manipulate the environment for building and so on. My argument is that we could actually flip that on its head and see that the technical interventions in the world come about through play in the first instance, through playing with materials and objects. So, on the one hand, we often, obviously not game scholars, but in the wider world, we often lump together games and toys as children's pastimes, and we don't see any clear distinction. On the other, when we look at children's culture today, people make quite a marked distinction between contemporary play and traditional, so-called traditional play. So, for example, we talk about children playing with technology, meaning video games, tablets, phones, and so on. With the implication being that toys and maybe board games and so on, card games, aren't technology. The argument I make throughout Toy Story is that toys are always technical. Many, many toys are mechanical. Going back on the screen, you can see here on the left jointed dolls and this is from, I think, 5th century BCE from Roman Egypt. Now, little ceramic figurines like this have been found in tombs and burial sites for millennia, and it's often a bit ambiguous about whether they are ritual objects or toys proper. Archaeologists believe that that objects like this with their jointed limbs indicate toys. They're not ritual objects. They're designed for children to play, to be manipulated, to be posed. You imagine a set of them sitting around or so on. On the right, we have another example of the toys machine. This is from Egypt, but we also find them in the archaeological record in Central America from before European colonization. So, and again, archaeologists have argued that the wheel is often considered the kind of archetypal human civilizational invention for transport and construction and so on. But it looks very strongly that the wheel was invented for ritual use, for pulling trolleys with ritual objects on, and for children's play. So this little object here is hand-sized. It's designed to work with the child's body, to be held in the hand, to be either pushed in a sweep of the child's arm or with a cord through its nose pulled along as a child goes about their daily life and play. So these are obviously examples of toys as mechanisms. There are others, many others. These are perhaps the most obvious example, more industrial examples. So from Meccano on the left to all the sort of panoply of pre-cinematic technologies, optical toys that fuse and split and came together in the development of not least cinema itself. I would argue too that even toys that aren't obviously mechanical are still technical. Um, Certainly, their materiality, their form, their scale, their materials they're made from are absolutely crucial to their modes of play. So the obvious example on the left is the cuddly toy. A softer. We go out to rag dolls and then later teddy bears and so on. Plush animals. These things have a sort of soft substrate. They can be hugged, cuddled. They're there for kind of, they're lightweight. They can be carried around by the child. They can be hugged. They can be whispered to, and so on. So the kind of imaginative play they facilitate is bound up in their material form. On the right, this is a modern sort of 1950s onwards version of another very, very old toy, the toy soldier, goes back to the Iron Age. And here, okay, there are articulated toy soldiers like Action Man and G.I. Joe. These are, modelled, molded as solid objects. But the way they work as a set is important. And again, this goes right back. It's their arrangement. They become a kind of machine for a broader drama of warfare, of battle, of tactics and strategy um, that is predicated on, again, their scale. There's small, um, yeah, tiny little things that can be arranged on a surface, on the floor, and tabletop, within reach of the arm to arrange battles and wars. And one of the chapters in the book, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but I trace a kind of very tangled genealogy of the kind of serious and the fantastical and the playful through uh, toy soldiers, uh, tabletop war games. On the right, we've got H.G. Wells' kind of hobbyist inventions around modelling warfare. On the left, the much more serious strategic forms of wargaming that came about after from Prussia in the early 19th century, which were seen as tools to uh, educate future war leaders about the nature of warfare and tactics and so on. And we can track that right through to the present day. Again, as I say, we can't separate out from uh, serious war planning that's still going on, of course, at national and global level, with the more fantastical and forms of Warhammer, or in this case, Advance Wars 2, other war simulation games. So let me just pop back a moment. The I don't attempt a clear definition of toys in the book. In a way, that's not what I'm more interested in, how toy-like objects and practices and play spread out into technoculture more widely. But there are some characteristics I think are very important. And again, it kind of nuances how we look at their relationship with games as a separate kind of playful object. And the categories I use are um, manipulability or operability. So the way you can actually make them work as machines or operate them as sets of objects like toy soldiers or dolls in a doll's house. Um, Tactility, the way they feel, the way the fingers can often be very important, and scale. And these things all tie together. So the orc miniature from Warhammer you see on the left there, its small scale is important, so we can arrange a number of these on a table to generate a battlefield. The scale of the Mickey Mouse doll we saw earlier it has to be big enough to be hugged, not just held in the hands. And then objects that get beyond hand or arm scale become less and less toy-like. They're less manipulable, less controllable in play. So what happens then when we come to the era of digital play? So here's an example, a very popular and famous form of toy for very young children, Lego's Duplo. Here it is as an app on a tablet. So on the one hand, they look very similar. I haven't played this game, but I imagine we can stack these bricks together in a way that looks similar to Duplo play. But the there are obviously very, very big differences. And again, if we go back to the relationship of the toys to the hands, we see an abstraction. The toys removed from direct manipulation by the fingers and thumbs uh, onto a screen with buttons or capacitive screen, touch screen. So I sort of play around a bit with looking at how traditional toys, so to speak, metamorphose into on-screen play objects. They're still manipulable. We still interact with them, make them do things playfully, but that relationship is quite different. So top left we have, excuse me a second. We have The Sims, which is effectively a kind of remediation of Doll's House. But again, rather than picking up and holding and positioning the dolls, we interact with them at a kind of remove. In this case, even more so than traditional avatars, we set parameters for their movement. We can try and guide them to do certain activities, but we don't control them. Top right, Call of Duty, so a toy soldier. Bottom left, toy cars in Grand Theft Auto. Bottom right, the construction sets and Lego and so on, reworked as virtual cities like in SimCity. And again, I mean, Will Wright famously talked about SimCity as a software toy. He didn't see it as a game because it didn't have that competitive element and win state that is often seen as a defining feature of games. Obviously, digital games have kind of moved beyond that, but certainly in the early days, that was seen as a key characteristic. So in one sense, you can see what he means. We do toy with the evolution of the city. We set parameters. We test ideas. What if I reduce taxes? What if I zone this area? What will happen? So there's a toy-like element to it, but it's very different to the hands-on, dexterous dynamics of play with sort of Lego and related toys. And we can see that sort of writ large in Lego games. Uh, so I guess just to I've sort of opened up a lot of issues, but just to kind of bring it together, what I don't want to do is to set this up as to denigrate the video game, to say, we're losing traditional play. What I want to do is to explore how play shifts across depending on the technical underpinnings. So a Lego city game like this, okay, we can't build the buildings. We can sort of build cars, the certain elements, but usually it's just pressing a button and then a pre-rendered sequence of construction is triggered. But on the other hand, the game does bring a lot of other playful modes. There's a playful engagement with narrative, or also jokes. Obviously, there's sound, there's music, there are puzzles, there's a story to explore. So we can delegate some aspects of imaginative play to the software, and that allows different modes of play. And I probably haven't got time to explore it in any detail, but I did some ethnographic work on children playing with hybrid games, where the toy and their digital versions are brought together in the system. In this case, Lego Dimensions, and I was struck by how, although visually the same thing is happening, the construction on the screen is directly mirroring the construction on, in this case, on the living room floor. The same set of instructions are in the children's hand and displayed on the screen. But what we see is a very different sense of rhythm and attention. Building the actual Lego construction is a lot slower and fiddlier, satisfying its own way, but the children were kind of torn between their pleasure in physical construction and the demands of the screen saying, hurry up, we've got our adventures to get started on here. Okay, I shall leave it at that. Hopefully it's raised a few points.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So people who are online, if you have any questions, please feel welcome to either just turn on your audio and ask the question directly, or you can also put it into the chat and I'll read it aloud. We do have some time for some questions. First off, there's a finger raised in the room, so we have one question.
Yes, thank you so much for your talk, and it reminded me that I should start reading your book. One of the things that I really enjoyed is that your examples, I'm in my 30s, I very much grew up with this like conversion of toy and digital games, so they were very relatable. So one of the things that I have been wondering about is, did you, during your research, find any merging or convergence between toy and digital games that were completely surprising to you, or a convergence that you're seeing, have seen, or are seeing now after you wrote your book, and you think that, okay, we should really take a look at that if we want to understand that relationship between digital games and toys more?
To be honest, I've not seen very much in the way of successful hybrid toy systems. And when I started sort of just sketching out ideas for the book, which is quite a long time ago now, we had things like Disney Infinity, as well as Lego Dimensions, and that folded quite quickly. And then we got there's a kind of game, sort of a board game called Beasts of Balance that we get rose from a research project that I was involved in, and that uses physical objects that they can be stacked in certain ways, that different animals that can be stacked in different ways that then trigger a response on a tablet, some animation. So the balance between the physical play and the virtual play is much better. I'm not sure if it's still going. They got bought out by Niantic, I think. So maybe it is. But generally, I do think that the distinction between the kind of manipulability of the toy is quite different from the kind of rule-bound delegation of action that we see in the digital game. That I'm not saying it's impossible, but I haven't seen anything that's has convinced me yet.
Okay, thank you so much.
I have a question. Was there any connection, or how much do you see a connection between the history of toy development as manipulable objects and other forms of physical play objects? I'm specifically thinking about playgrounds and other kinds of spaces where people are invited to play with them, but they're much too big to manipulate like a toy. but they're meant like a swing set or this kind of history. How do they connect?
That's really interesting. I've actually done a bit of work on the history of the technology of playgrounds, and I don't think there's a lot of. I haven't come across any obvious connections. Playgrounds tend to come up more out of a kind of educational and almost moralistic sort of civic intention. I think sometimes in relation to anxieties that working class children weren't healthy enough to join the army. Yeah, so we have to have these kind of outdoor gymnasia to get their health, to get their fitness up in case we go to war. It's a bit of an extreme example, but there's something of that there. That said, I worked with Danish artist called Team Beck on a project to make swings interactive. So if you can make traditional mechanical playground equipment where you can add kind of game-like elements to them. This is mainly done through light and sound. So if anyone's interested, drop me a line. I can send you a link to the project. But yeah, it's one of these things where, uh, yeah, like I said, I don't want a fixed definition of toys, but things like playgrounds are obviously technologies that are directly related to toys, but different in important ways. Like you say, you can't pick them up and move them, but you can interact in other ways.
Okay, interesting. Cool. Questions? All right, I think that's about the time. So was there a question that was raised? Yes, the circle of cosmographers, please.
Please. Hi, can you hear us okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Thank you for a great presentation. Your work's actually been influential on our research as well, so we've been a fan of it, and it's great to hear you talk through it. The question we were kind of pondering through is like on the digital side of things, thinking about, if I'm understanding how you're framing this, is one way of talking about these like digital quote unquote toys or all video games is that the toy in one sense is the mouse and the keyboard or the device, which are not particularly toy-like devices, but all of those are toys that which with that as one of the hybrid components. And depending on how you feel about that, what do you think about, what are the implications for embodied cognition and play if toys are like constricted down to just these like couple of objects? If the only toy objects we ever play with are a mouse and a keyboard or a perfectly smooth surface of a device, how does that relate to like thoughts about embodied cognition and play, if at all, for you?
I mean, it's a fascinating question. One I have been thinking about recently. It's in a way it's beyond my expertise, but I have been reading up recently on the phenomenon known as the simian thumb. So, which is through evolution of primates, the opposable thumb becomes not only a way to more directly connect with the environment, to be able to pick things up and obviously grab branches and manipulate objects and food and so on, but it's directly connected to the development of the frontal cortex and the brain. So, without being throughout my attention to children and technology, I've always resisted the doom-laden assumptions that everything's apocalyptic conclusions. But it does concern me. I do wonder if manual dexterity is reduced to pointing to a screen and not holding and manipulating things, then that could have a detrimental effect on cognitive development. Having said that, that's assuming children have all sorts of other objects lying around that they pick up and play with and had before tablets. So, babies play with their own toes and then about their bodies and so on. So I don't want to overstate it, but yeah, I do think, I think you get the idea.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you again. And we are now going to move to our second speaker. So, yes, stand here and you are online here. Okay. And let's see. Where's the slideshow? Oh, yeah. Let's see. Great.
Should I start?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leon. Thank you for the invitation to play. It's been great so far. Good evening, Tampere and the world. Very far away from where I'm standing right at this moment. So, I thought it's a fascinating possibility to talk about something that I've been thinking about during recent years as we are facing these various crises in the world. What kind of responsibility we as toy, play, and game researchers and designers have to think about a thing called hope, because hope is something that indicates that we think, at least, that we have a future ahead of us. And I have seen that play is very future oriented. And I have just begun my studies in future studies, so I will only be bringing up some theoretical terms from that context. But I will nevertheless do so because I want to challenge myself and hopefully also inspire your thinking about why play should also be thought about in terms of these proactive, forward-oriented perspectives as an empowering way of interacting with the world. That gives us hope, hopefully. And I cannot resist to mention this to you because this is of recent developments. In the very end of last year, I received a docentship here at Tampere University, which is, thank you, very unique in Finland. We know that we have game researchers who have gone a little bit into the area of play and have the word play in Finnish leikki included in their docentships. But this is unique because I have the word toy in mind. So I'm very proud of this. And I'm, of course, immensely proud that this happens to be placed here at Tampere University. I do have another docentship as well, and that is with the Turku School of Economics and in the area of entrepreneurship. And believe it or not, I also use a lot of ideas from entrepreneurial thinking when I discuss play nowadays, because it has some similar perspectives on this future orientedness that I just spoke about. But it's a special docentship in that sense that it doesn't end with entrepreneurship, it continues. It's entrepreneurship, particularly playful learning. So we do have playful integrated into the title of that docentship as well. So this is what I wanted to share with you right from the start. And many of you know my background, which has to do during the last years with the fact that I have produced 2 doctoral degrees and theses, and listening to Seth's talk and having familiarized myself with his work and books, there's quite some significant similarities in how we address toys. And in my first thesis, let's go to that in a while, but I have begun already to address the importance of materiality in games. And this goes as a family tradition because some of you might know, and those who don't, I come from a family of games and entrepreneurship within game production, game design. And this is my father on the right-hand side, playing a game that landed in Finland in the late 60s called Trouble at the Times, but it was translated into Finnish. We got the license to the game and the production rights and started its production in a garage. So pretty much our family company was a startup of its own time. But look at this. My dad is holding a blue pawn in his hands. And I've sort of made a joke out of this because I've never really knew before when I really started to study this picture that he was playing with a blue pawn, because I always want to have the blue pawn, and even my friends know this. But this is to illustrate how important I feel and find the visuality and materiality of games, and that has had a lot of significance, for the reason of why I became a toy researcher. Here you can see how the game looked back in the days when it launched originally. So I have worked as a game designer, especially in the field of board games. So you understand, they are tactile, they are manipulable, they are playable from very many perspectives, they are intriguing visual objects. And funnily enough, I've been looking at the intersections between games and toys also in my research for a very long time, making my toys play games, etc. And also designing games that are very toy-like in themselves. So I've connected these two worlds in my practical work as a designer, mostly working with games that are intended for children. So my background is kind of wide in that sense, that I had the possibility not only to work with the family company, but also extended my design to cooperation with museums. And therefore, I worked with exhibition design, having to do with toys and games. I've also worked as a play expert at the Mannerheim League for Child Welfare. But enough said about that. You could see my first doctoral thesis there, where I looked at adult toy play. And adult toy play is a very controversial term, as you can imagine, and as it was back in the days. In 2008, 2009, when I started to do this research, there was not much understanding in the field of researching toys as a toy researcher, because many people are interested in toys and researching them, but they call themselves something else. I, however, am a true toy researcher. In the second thesis, which is something that has a lot of parallels to Seth's work, I'm looking at how play moves us. And this came out, I got my degree in March 2024, and how play moves us is a dissertation about toys, technology, and digitality, or mobility in a digital world. So I'm looking at play machines, those devices that were just mentioned in the previous talk, how people actually play with digital devices that are not necessarily produced in order to be played with. And my work came out just at the threshold of when generative AI started to gain popularity. And I do address AI a bit in the thesis as well. But I'm lucky to have escaped that. Researchers dealing with that question today have a lot more information to deal with. So this would be the theses you can read and compare, of course, to other toy research, the similarities between the interests of the intersections of toys and games and how these toys are played with. I want to pay special attention to my focus, which is character toys and world playing. And by character toys, I mean dolls, action figures, and soft toys. And as you can imagine, as you have probably experienced from your own play with things. The fiddle factor in association with these toys is extremely important, that they are tactile, but also that they are narrative objects. And they can be touched, they can be arranged, they can be displayed, they can be endlessly practice storytelling with. And I was actually one of the first ones who started to do research under the label of kidultism. So that has now gained a lot of attention in the mass market of toys, the actual business of toys. And this is the way how the toy industry labels adults who play with toys, because there's still reluctance in using the term adult toy play. Adult toys is a different story. I have done research on sex toys as well, but sorry. Is that good? Perfect. Thank you for mentioning it. All right. So since the early days of conducting the research for the first doctoral thesis, one could say that I have developed toy theory with multiple publications, I believe some 160 articles, essays, book chapters, conference proceedings on various playthings. One of the latest ones that is about to come out soon is this again in the intersection between toys and games. So as time runs and we haven't really gotten into the beef of this presentation, I will just quickly run through this. But you will see how I understand my research to connect with all of these areas. So of course I worked with many of you here in Tampere who are game scholars and have interests in that field. But from this slide, you can see that also looking at play from the material and visual, even the digital side, has a lot of different opportunities for research. I've even looked at playful spaces. And I've coined these kind of various types of play in my research. And these are important for what I'm trying to argue for here, that in order to understand contemporary play, we must do empirical research to understand the forms of play that emerge from that. And this, of course, is playing by doing. And that indicates hope, because we are proactive, we are producing something, at least something moves in our minds, our imaginations, our bodies when we play. So photo play is one of them, doll dramas, toy tourism, toy activism, and the latest one is speculative toy fiction. And this has a lot to do with futures research, because with these imaginative visions of toys to come, we can imagine how play evolves in the future. And also, going back to Seth's presentation, we can revolutionize our thinking about what kind of devices, play machines, as I call them, are we dealing with, let's say, a couple of tens of or decades on from this point in time. What are we playing with? What moves us in play? What kind of devices might set us in motion? I'm intrigued of this notion of speculative toy fiction, and this would mean literature, movies, TV series that depict toys of the future with these fictional interfaces. And I've also sketched out this ecosystem of play a long time ago. And if you want to look at the paper that deals with toyification, that indicates you the different dimensions of what we understand to be toys and what kind of qualities in toys we can see in other areas of play, such as in games. That is a particularly useful paper to look at the conceptual statement on toyification. And finally, also addressing this point what do games and toys have in common? A lot, obviously. I have understood through my research that games and constructional toys resemble each other quite a lot. But there are other developments, such as the involvement of social media, which is obvious. How do we know so much about play these days? It's because people document their play, they share their play, they share information about their interactions with their toys, and so on. And finally, the doll as an adult avatar. This I have written about already in 2012, and it's still an intriguing question if we consider today's AI toys, for instance. And the kind of frameworks developed in my research also can be handy for all kinds of game and play experiences. I've understood them as physical, functional, fictional, and affective, but I've also added something on the list quite recently. So with this, I wanted to explain to you how what a toy is not necessarily nowadays a very clear-cut understanding of a tactile objects, because this has so many connections to games with rules, which toys usually don't have, but also with the connections of toys to digital realms. Now to today's topic. So humans learn by doing, and they learn best by playing. So I wanted, of course, to say a few words about play as the new hope. And then I cannot resist of mentioning shortly these examples of the art of making a game, making games, artified experiences, and making art a game, because we are here at the Games and Arts Center. So a couple of years back, this was pretty much around the early pandemic, or even before that, I started to look at these self-help books and how they address hope. And one of the significant works that everyone should familiarize themselves with is Rutger Bregman's book, Humankind, A Hopeful History. So that takes us also all the way to Brian Sutton-Smith, who has said that the only things that are worth in life that make us go on living are art and play. So these are things that make us hopeful. So there actually exist phenomena that contribute to our hopefulness in a way. And when I really got into this was by looking at pandemic play or pandemic toy play even. This was obviously at the start of the pandemic when the Teddy Challenge emerged as a play pattern. And I've done several publications on this, looking at how people in many countries of the world placed such heavy significance on teddy bears and other plush animals that I then later on understood and termed as objects of resilience. So this is another facet of hope and games and toys. And I started to look at toy activism in other areas as well. But this was a very, very clear-cut case about how toys and play bring us hope in the ways we are utilizing them. And the ways people played with them were a lot of different play patterns. So the most important ones was, of course, that people placed these toys in the windows where others could see them. It was a spectating play in a way. But they put such emphasis and creativity into creating long-term stories around their toy displays in the windows. And what this started to signal was playing for the common good, which I then coined into Ludo Unity. So play in an era of uncertainty produced a lot of toy activism, but there's other kinds of toy activism in the world. play for a cause, and this is playing for politics, of course. And I promised to throw in terms and terminology from future studies research, where there's a lot of discussions around empowerment, anticipatory agency, and these kind of things that talk about this proactive stance that people have. And with my colleague Kati Suomi, we have compared entrepreneurship competencies and play competencies. I guess the next step for me will be to look at future studies and add another column there, looking at the theories that particularly address these competencies. Play is also possible to be seen as a sustainable practice. And when I was working at the Mannerheim League for Child Welfare, I curated these principles of sustainable play. They are here in Finnish, but you can see there are many. And I also speak about the fact that today's play takes place in hybrid environments where the physical and the digital overlap. And this is, of course, very necessary to think about when we consider sustainability. When we look at digital play too, we should think about sustainability. It's not only a matter of the matter of playthings in a physical sense, but also the digital part. So play is also spoken of in terms of emancipatory futures if we look at play from a future studies perspective. So emancipatory and okay, it's getting late. Never mind. You know the word I had on the previous slide. These are important terms because they make us understand that we have agency. So by playing, by doing whatever brings us to the next step, is something that we can consider future orientedness. And pandemic toy play was certainly a case of that. So I mentioned Ludo Unity. I'm getting to the end of the presentation, and also the dimensions of play, toys and design, physical, functional, fictional, and affective. But I've then, after that, added on the socially meaningful and temporal aspects as well. And of course, there might be many more, but this is a framework through which you can look at different experiences. So finally, some very quick examples of the art of making a game, and then the other ways of looking at the connections between art and games, since we are at this center. So believe it or not, that was the title of my master's thesis for the University of Art and Design before it turned into Aalto. So I looked at the art of making a game, the skills of making a game. And I mentioned photo play, and I've been looking at toys and war in my work. If we consider this the art of toys and in a way games too. Then I have been exploring how making games artified experiences looks like. So I've basically used spare parts from games and turned that into art. I've also been working with mobile games and created these geocaching trails, which use the story of the dog called Sigrid. I've done urban installations and written children's storybooks, and created this Comic Cubes tool that has been used in the Postal Museum here in Tampere. So it's like an interaction tool for museums. And I've used the Comic Cubes extensively in my teaching. Making art a game, I have an artist group called Peak Experience, and also looking there how arts and games intersect in terms of interaction, design, and with the Peak Experience group, we do art based and inspired by Twin Peaks. And here you can see some examples of that. So finally, here's the framework for the physical, functional, fictional, affective, social, and temporal. And with social also, please keep in mind the participatory aspect of things. And Ludo Unity, playing for the common good, which I think is essential when we consider play and hope together. And then there's the notion of radical hope. And this, I think, is my last slide. And Brian Sutton-Smith is my absolute guru in play and also toys to a certain part. And he has these lovely quotes, which one of them touches upon hope, which says, life, it seems, always becomes more exciting when the hope of play exists. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
All right, I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Was there someone online who were you pointing at something?
By me.
Who was first?
Question. Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering about the following. You wrote this paper on gamified Labubu, and there's of course a lot of like sustainability issues, gambling issues with Labubu, and then you have the topic of hope.
How could this be combined?
Yeah, well, maybe not combined or the tensions. Like, I think you understand what I'm trying to ask your views on.
Yeah, for this provocative question. That's a lovely question. I'm glad you noticed it. As a toy researcher, it was something of a must to do something on Labubu because it came and it went, or that is the experience that I have. I never got a Labubu of my own, but I was very closely looking at the phenomenon. And I had the possibility to work with Brazilian colleagues. So we did some comparisons between Brazil and Finland based on newspaper articles. So we didn't go to the players to do interviews with them or something like that. But you're absolutely right that should these two topics be combined, that would produce a lot of questions, of course. And I think this whole phenomenon is interesting for several reasons. It brought very clearly the fact into many people's consciousness that adults are also buying toys, and those times are over when we can ridicule this. Even the toy industry itself, I think, actually finally got this, that adults are also buying the toys. I don't know how much gamification was part of producing this whole phenomena, but I guess with the unboxing dimension of these toys, which is also a very good question regarding sustainability, it is one to try to think of. But there's this strangeness also thinking as a Westerner about the fact that this was the first Chinese toy brand that really revolutionized the market in a way. So there are many questions around sustainability and that, and the fake Labubus and the culture around those. But this also, there's one certain example of hopefulness that I combine with Labubus in Brazil, because there came up this certain version that was a fake Labubu, but it was a toy portrait of their president, and they called the toy La Fufu. Was it so, or am I now? La Fufu are the fake ones. So it was the president's name, who is La Lulu. Yes, now I got it right. Yes, thank you. La Fufu is the fake ones. So I think hopeful in a way, because that is toy activism in a sense. So the toy is used as a tool to address local politics, whatever. So I mean, intriguing question, and thank you for that. I might not have answered your question or comment at all, but to sort of like defend the choice of doing Labubu research is based simply on the fact that you had to grasp the opportunity as it came and write something about it so that it would not vanish in history without toy researchers actually putting down their pen and writing something about that. So thank you so much for the question. It was certainly an intriguing one.
Any other questions?
I will maybe risk a bit asking this one. Sorry if you have no answer for it, you might not. But since you mentioned that you were dealing with toys, play, and war, and now you're dealing with hope, I want to ask your thoughts on one particular example. There is a thing that is in English called the Czech hedgehog, the anti-tank obstacle. You can imagine it very well, I think. There are instances of this thing being recreated as a toy, both child toy and adult toy, sold, of course, with some money going for support of people suffering from the warfare, but sold and existing as a toy at places of different people. I know that it because I have one. Do you think that under the circumstances and considering that at least it was massively happening throughout many years in Ukraine, like selling of this toy, is it hopeful? Is it hopeless? Where in terms of hope could such toy be put?
Thank you, and you're absolutely right. I really cannot answer that, but I think you suggested something worthy of further research. So thank you for that. And even as a toy researcher who is very mobile and travels around the world, I don't know every single toy phenomenon that exists, but I do know something cool that goes alongside the topic of toys and war. And let me see if I have it in my bag. I might not have it, but I can describe it certainly. So Brian McCarthy, he's an activist of sorts, and he has developed a toy line that he launched at Nuremberg Toy Fair this year. And these are toys that look, when you look at them from a distance, we saw them in Seth's presentation as well, this kind of toy soldier like plastic figurines. But instead of them being soldiers, they are rescue workers, humanitarian aid workers. And he has developed this on basis of a photo play project where he empowers children to speak of their experiences in different parts of the world where war takes place at this time. They draw pictures of their experiences, and he then photo plays the pictures by using commercial toys. And now he has the toy line of his own. So I think you can turn toys and war as a thematic topic into something hopeful as well. And I think nevertheless, play is about not only fantasy, but also connecting to real life phenomena. And that's the way we are dealing with these unbearable things and making some kind of sense of them if we can. So toys help in that process. And my Toys and War project was here because it had this kind of photo play being produced out of real wartime events that took place in Finland during the World War. And they are based on like photographs, real war photographs, where I replay these instances in a similar way that Brian McCarthy does now with children. But anyhow, I think, of course, yes, no matter how hard and heavy the topic is, nearly everything can and should be played with. for us to overcome these crises. Hallelujah.
And on that hopeful message, thank you so much for your talk. That's going to be the end of our talk for right now. We will be back next month for Games and Time. And then one final comment, we just opened up submissions for the Games as Art Festival. So if you know anyone who's making artistic games or would like to be a part of either digital, non-digital, or somewhere in the middle, surprising, that will be next October here in Tampere. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time. We'll leave the chat open for a little bit of time if you have any final questions or you want to share your email or contacts or anything like that. But then we'll wrap up. Thank you so much. And thank you, Paul, for running the tech. Many surprises today. Thank you so much.